every empire has fallen, every fortune has crumbled, but the one thing that never breaks is the mindset of a person who knows this rule. If you miss it, you'll stay fragile. If you master it, nothing in life can touch you. This is not just another motivational idea, it's the unbreakable mindset rule that history's greatest leaders, thinkers, and creators lived by. In the next few minutes, you'll discover how this one principle can make you untouchable in the face of failure, criticism, and adversity. When we speak of strength, most people imagine physical force, wealth, or the influence that comes from power and status. But I want you to recognize that the greatest strength a man or woman can ever possess is the authority they hold over their own mind. When you govern your own thoughts, your own emotions, and your own responses, you place yourself beyond the reach of manipulation. No one can pull your strings, no matter how clever or forceful they appear, because the seat of control lies within you. This, my friends, is the true meaning of inner authority. Think about it, every human action is born in thought. Every victory, every failure, every achievement, and every downfall originates first in the mind. If you do not claim sovereignty over that sacred ground, someone else surely will. Advertisers spend billions trying to do it. Politicians craft speeches precisely to sway your emotions. Even your family, friends, and colleagues often unconsciously attempt to mold your thinking to fit their vision of who you should be. Without inner authority, you live as a puppet, dancing to strings pulled by forces outside your control. Yet, when you decide firmly and without hesitation that your mind belongs to you alone, something extraordinary happens. A shield rises around you. People may speak, but their words lose the power to wound. Circumstances may shift, but they do not shake your foundation. You begin to operate from a place of independence so rare, so unshakable, that others cannot help but notice. They see in you something they wish they had but cannot name. That is the aura of true authority. Now, authority over the mind does not come easily. It requires discipline. It requires the courage to stand apart from the crowd, to think independently even when 10,000 voices tell you you are wrong. It requires the restraint to silence impulsive reactions and the wisdom to choose responses that serve your higher purpose. This is not about denial, it is about governance. Just as a skilled ruler does not allow chaos to reign in his kingdom, you cannot permit random fears, doubts, and passions to dictate your mental state. History shows us that the men and women who bent the world to their will were those who first mastered themselves. They were not easily persuaded by flattery, nor were they easily disheartened by criticism. They moved with a clarity of purpose that baffled their opponents. Napoleon Hill himself wrote that self-discipline is the master key to riches, because it keeps the mind loyal to its vision. And when the mind is loyal to its vision, it cannot be conquered. The greatest tragedy is that most people give away their authority far too cheaply. They allow a rude comment to ruin an entire day. They allow fear to paralyze them before they even attempt the thing they desire. They allow circumstances to dictate their emotions, instead of commanding their emotions to rise above circumstances. Do you see the imbalance here? A person with all the tools of success in hand will still fail if they let their mind be ruled by forces beyond their control. But a person with nothing, who masters themselves, will carve out success from the harshest of environments. So how does one begin to claim this authority? The first step is awareness. Notice when your mind runs away with fear or anger. Notice when your mood is swayed by someone else's opinion. Awareness shines a light on the battlefield. The second step is deliberate control. When fear whispers in your ear, speak louder with faith. When anger rises, counter it with calm resolve. When doubt intrudes, answer it with action. You are not trying to erase these voices, you are training them, subordinating them to the command of your higher self. Over time, this practice becomes second nature. You will find yourself less reactive, more thoughtful, more grounded. Where once you were easily swayed, now you remain steady. Where once external forces dictated your day, now you dictate the terms of your engagement with life. This is the mark of inner authority. It is not arrogance, nor is it aloofness. It is a quiet, unshakable confidence that no matter what happens outside, the true command center remains secure inside. And here is the final truth: when you govern your own mind, you also earn the natural respect of others. People instinctively trust and follow those who cannot be rattled. They sense that you are not desperate for approval, nor easily crushed by opposition. That kind of stability is magnetic, but it must be genuine. It cannot be faked, for the world has a way of exposing pretenders. Only real inner authority can produce that untouchable presence. So I leave you with this thought: the world will always try to claim pieces of your mind. It will always try to sway, distract, or dishearten you. But the choice remains yours: either surrender that authority, or guard it with your life. For the one who rules their own mind is the only one truly free, and freedom of the mind is the beginning of all power. Rule yourself, or be ruled by everything else. If you want to know the measure of a man, do not look at his victories, his wealth, or even his intellect. Look at the state of his emotions under pressure. For it is here, in the furnace of frustration, insult, and temptation, that the true strength of the mind is revealed. The ability to hold one's emotional reins firmly, to not be carried away by anger, fear, or vanity, is what separates those who are governed by the world from those who govern themselves. Emotional discipline, in its purest form, is not about suppression. It is about mastery. And mastery of one's emotions is the greatest fortress against manipulation. Consider how easily men are swayed when provoked. A single insult can drive one into foolish decisions. A whisper of flattery can blind another into exploitation. A surge of fear can make even the strong surrender what they would never part with in calmness. History is filled with kingdoms lost because kings could not bridle their pride, and fortunes ruined because men could not govern their greed. Those who cannot discipline their emotions are like open gates in a fortress. Any passerby can walk in, set the terms, and plunder. Yet the man who has learned to command his emotions, he builds walls that no manipulator can scale. You see, the world often tests your stability. It whispers, it provokes, it entices. Every advertisement you see, every political speech you hear, every personal slight you endure, they are all attempts to reach past your reason and touch your emotions. Because men can be convinced only so far by logic, but they can be moved endlessly by emotion. This is why leaders who understand human psychology exploit feelings more than facts. And it is also why the individual who strengthens his emotional discipline stands apart as untouchable. He cannot be swayed by the tides of other people's moods, fears, or desires. But how does one acquire this fortress of composure? It begins with the practice of pause. When emotion rises, be it anger, envy, or fear, you must create distance between the stimulus and your response. That pause is your battlefield. If you allow anger to dictate your next words, you have surrendered authority to the one who provoked you. If you let fear shape your next choice, you have allowed circumstances to govern your destiny. But if you pause, breathe, and remind yourself that you are master, not slave of your inner state, you reclaim sovereignty. In that moment, you are no longer reacting, you are choosing. And choice is the mark of freedom. Now, do not misunderstand. To discipline your emotions is not to become cold or lifeless. A man without feeling is no man at all. Passion, love, enthusiasm, these are powers that fuel achievement. What I speak of is control, not denial. It is knowing how to channel emotion as a servant, not letting it seize the throne as a master. Anger, for instance, when tamed, becomes righteous determination. Fear, when disciplined, becomes caution and foresight. Even sadness, when understood, can be turned into empathy and depth. The fortress is not built to block emotion, but to harness it. And when emotions serve under discipline, they add force to your decisions without robbing you of clarity. Think also of how manipulators prey on those who lack this strength. The salesman who pressures you by fear of missing out. The rival who insults you until you lash out irrationally. The flatterer who feeds your vanity until you lower your guard. Each one relies on the cracks in your emotional control. But when you stand unshaken, when flattery does not move you, when insult does not disturb you, when fear does not make you abandon reason, they are disarmed. They realize they cannot control you, and therefore they cannot conquer you. The great Stoics of history, the wise men of philosophy, and even the spiritual masters all echo the same truth: to rule yourself is to be unconquerable. For he who has no control over his anger will always be ruled by the one who can provoke it. And he who has no control over his desires will always be ruled by the one who can supply them. Emotional discipline, therefore, is not a luxury, it is the essence of freedom. It is the proof that you are not a puppet dangling on the strings of circumstance, but a sovereign directing his own life. So I ask you, what would change in your life if no one could manipulate you? If anger no longer forced your hand? If fear no longer bent your decisions, if vanity no longer opened your defenses, you would be untouchable, would you not? The storms of life would blow, but you would not be moved. The temptations of the world would shine, but you would not be deceived. That is the power emotional discipline grants. Remember this: the man who rules his emotions rules his world, and the man who is ruled by his emotions will forever be ruled by others. Discipline is the wall. Discipline is the sword. Discipline is the fortress. And those who build it, brick by brick, will stand above the chaos of manipulation, untouchable, unbroken, and truly free. Let us speak plainly about one of the most subtle, yet most enslaving traps of the human mind: the craving for approval. From childhood, we are conditioned to seek it. A smile from a parent, a pat on the back from a teacher, a compliment from a friend — these become the invisible currencies by which we measure our worth. Later in life, the same mechanism persists, only it wears different masks. We hunger for praise from colleagues, validation from strangers, acknowledgement from society at large. And yet, with every ounce of our energy spent chasing approval, we forfeit something greater: the freedom to live aligned with our own truth. To detach from approval is not to reject love, respect, or recognition. Rather, it is to recognize that such things, valuable as they may be, cannot serve as the compass of your decisions. If you allow praise to inflate you, criticism will inevitably deflate you. If you let applause dictate your steps, then the absence of it will paralyze you. To live untouchable, you must build a foundation deeper than the shifting sands of other people's opinions. History bears witness to the fact that every man or woman who achieved greatness walked this path of detachment. They were misunderstood, criticized, mocked, and condemned before they were admired. The inventor is called a fool before he is called a genius. The revolutionary is branded a traitor before he is remembered as a patriot. The philosopher is scorned before his words reshape civilizations. If these men and women had sought approval, they would have been broken at the first sign of rejection. But they understood a higher law: that truth requires courage, and courage requires independence from the opinions of the crowd. Psychologically, the desire for approval is nothing more than the fear of rejection dressed in a more polite form. It is the mind's way of bargaining for safety. If they like me, I am secure. If they disapprove, I am in danger. But what happens when you place your security in the hands of others? You surrender the very authority over your inner world. You become a puppet, and the strings are pulled not by your own will but by the applause and criticism of the moment. Philosophically, detachment from approval is an act of liberation. It does not mean indifference or arrogance. It means choosing to anchor your worth in principles, not in popularity. It means you rise each day with a question not of, "What will they think?" but, "Is this true to my purpose?" When you govern your life with such clarity, praise becomes pleasant but not intoxicating, and criticism becomes painful but not crippling. You stand as a fortress open to the winds of opinion, yet unmoved at your core. Think for a moment of the countless people who abandoned dreams because they were laughed at. They wrote a page and never published the book. They sketched a design and never built the machine. They felt the fire of ambition, but let it die under the cold water of ridicule. These are not failures of talent or opportunity. They are failures of detachment. They allowed the fear of disapproval to outweigh the call of their vision. The world never knew their genius because they traded it for comfort. On the other hand, those who stood firm, who refused to measure themselves by praise or blame, altered history itself. Consider the thinkers who challenged dogma, the leaders who defied tyrannies, the innovators who went against the tide of tradition. Their secret was not superior intelligence alone. It was the courage to walk the path of truth, even when it was lined with jeers instead of cheers. They discovered that the road to lasting significance is paved with temporary rejection. Let me be very clear: detachment from approval does not mean that you close your ears to feedback or that you isolate yourself in stubbornness. Wisdom listens, pride ignores. But listening and living for approval are two very different things. The wise man takes counsel without surrendering his compass. He hears both applause and criticism, yet neither becomes his master. He remains free, guided by his higher vision, not enslaved by the whims of the crowd. So I ask you, whose approval do you crave, and at what cost? Are you building your life upon the fragile opinions of others, or upon the bedrock of your own principles? Every time you hesitate out of fear of what others may say, You trade a piece of your freedom for a shadow of acceptance. Every time you shape yourself to please, you diminish the sharpness of your own truth. True freedom is not the absence of relationships or recognition. It is the presence of courage to stand unshaken, whether surrounded by applause or silence. When you master detachment from approval, you unlock a power that cannot be taken from you. For no praise can control you, and no criticism can destroy you. And so I leave you with this: live not for their approval, nor die by their rejection. Anchor yourself in principle, act with courage, and let the world's voices rise and fall like passing winds. The man who is free from the need to be liked is the man who is finally free to lead. Picture for a moment the warrior who walks into battle with victory already burning in his mind. Long before the clash of swords, long before the shouts of men, he has already seen the outcome. He has rehearsed it within the sanctuary of his imagination, and in that invisible rehearsal, he has defeated doubt before it even approaches. This is not daydreaming, nor is it a child's wishful thinking. It is the deliberate use of the mind's creative faculty, what I call mental rehearsal, the art of seeing the victory before the battle begins. And make no mistake, every challenge you face in life is a battle, whether it is for your career, your health, your wealth, or your peace of mind. You see, the mind has a peculiar trait. It does not distinguish very well between what you vividly imagine and what you physically experience. Neuroscience has confirmed what the ancients already knew. When you picture yourself performing an action with intensity, your brain lights up as though you are performing it in reality. This is the hidden power that great leaders, athletes, generals, and creators have used across history. They didn't merely hope for victory, they trained their minds to live inside it until it became an inevitability. They rehearsed conversations, battles, speeches, decisions. And by the time the moment arrived, they weren't surprised by success. They were simply stepping into a reality they had already built within. Mental rehearsal is not an indulgence, it is a discipline. The weak-willed imagine failure, humiliation, or catastrophe. They replay the film of their life with defeat as the ending, and the mind obligingly drags them toward it. But the strong, the untouchable, refuse to let their imagination be hijacked by fear. They train it to become a stage where only strength, clarity, and triumph are performed. By doing this, they enter the field of action with a deep sense of familiarity. They feel as though they have already won, and this confidence bends reality in their favor. But let me caution you, it is not enough to close your eyes and dream. The rehearsal must be structured, disciplined, repeated. The actor does not practice once and assume mastery. The musician does not glance at the notes and assume performance. They drill again and again until the performance flows without resistance. Likewise, your mental rehearsal must be precise. You must see yourself speaking with poise under pressure, making the difficult decision with courage, resisting temptation with calm strength. You must picture it in detail, the sound of your voice steady and firm, the sensation of control in your body, the relief of success already achieved. The more real it becomes in your imagination, the more natural it becomes in your reality. Some will say, but what if reality does not match my vision? That is the complaint of those who do not understand the law of preparation. The mind rehearses not to guarantee that every detail unfolds as pictured, but to fortify you against uncertainty. The true power of rehearsal is not in predicting the exact outcome, but in shaping your mental state so that no matter the twists, you remain composed, confident, unshaken. The one who has rehearsed victory does not panic when the unexpected appears. He adapts because he already feels like a victor within. And let me tell you, the opponent, whether that opponent is another person, a circumstance, or your own inner fear, can sense that aura of inevitability. Confidence intimidates. Preparation disarms. Certainty creates hesitation in those who would oppose you. Think of the general who surveys the battlefield before a single arrow flies. He moves his pieces in his mind, anticipates the ambush, imagines the counterstrike. When dawn arrives and the fight begins, he is not reacting blindly. He is playing out what he has already mastered in thought. Or think of the athlete who, before stepping onto the track, has already run the race in his mind 100 times. His body, his nerves, his breath, all are trained to follow the mind's command. That is why his stride is steady while others stumble. Now ask yourself what battles are before you that require rehearsal. A difficult negotiation, a public speech, a confrontation with temptation or weakness. Do not wait until the moment arrives to improvise. Train now. Rehearse now. For when the hour comes, you will not rise to the level of your wishes, you will fall to the level of your preparation. Mental rehearsal is not an illusion, it is the most practical of tools. It gives you composure when others break down. It gives you focus when others scatter. It gives you victory before the world even realizes the battle has begun. So discipline your imagination. Refuse to let fear run its productions in your mind. Instead, direct the stage of your inner world like a master. See the victory, hear it, feel it, until it becomes your most natural state. Then, when you step into reality, you will discover something astonishing. The victory outside has no choice but to align with the victory already alive within. And here is the truth you must carry with you. If you cannot see yourself winning in the silence of your own mind, you will never win in the noise of the world. Rehearse the triumph until it becomes your second nature, and when the battle comes, you will not merely fight, you will fulfill what you have already lived. That is the cold, unbreakable rule of the untouchable mind. When most people encounter a setback, their first instinct is to recoil, to protect themselves, to avoid further loss. They see failure as a wall and stop their journey there. But the mind that remains untouchable does not respond in this way. Instead, it transforms the setback into fuel. This is what I call the rule of antifragility. Where fragile minds break under pressure, and resilient minds merely endure, the antifragile mind thrives under difficulty. It grows stronger not despite the stress, but because of it. The untouchable individual sees in every failure the blueprint of a greater strategy. Think of how the blacksmith tempers steel. The metal, in its raw state, is too soft to be useful. But when subjected to fire, hammered and cooled, it becomes something unbreakable. Likewise, your mind must pass through the flames of defeat to become capable of carrying you to higher victories. The moment you shield yourself from failure, you shield yourself from growth. The harsh truth is that without challenges, your mental muscles atrophy. Without trials, your will weakens. It is only by leaning into the very obstacles that threaten to stop you that you discover a strength you never imagined was there. The great entrepreneurs, inventors, and leaders who shaped history were not spared failure. In fact, they encountered more of it than the average person. But what set them apart was not a smooth path, it was the way they interpreted their detours. Thomas Edison, after thousands of failed attempts at creating the electric bulb, famously remarked that he had not failed, he had simply found thousands of ways that would not work. That reframing is the essence of antifragility, the refusal to see a dead end where there is only a lesson in disguise. What most people overlook is that setbacks contain coded intelligence. Within every obstacle is hidden information about your weaknesses, your blind spots, or the flaws in your plan. The person who collapses at failure misses this intelligence. The person who hardens against it might endure, but they will not evolve. But the one who extracts the lesson, who rewires their plan with the information uncovered, transforms failure into a secret ally. Each defeat becomes a mentor. Each disappointment becomes a silent guide. Now, this mindset is not easy to adopt because it requires humility. It requires you to admit that you do not have all the answers, and that the process of discovering them may bruise your ego. But once you make peace with that, you become unstoppable. A man who does not fear setbacks is a man who cannot be manipulated, cannot be broken, cannot be stalled. Every strike against him sharpens his edge. I want you to consider what happens if you remove this principle from your life. Without antifragility, every failure feels like a death sentence. You hesitate before taking risks because you cannot tolerate the thought of loss. And in avoiding that discomfort, you avoid growth. You end up living a smaller life, one shaped not by your vision but by your fear. In contrast, when you embrace antifragility, you actually crave challenge. You welcome the fire knowing it is refining you. You stop asking, "Why me?" and start asking, "What is this trying to teach me?" The paradox here is that setbacks do not weaken the untouchable mind, they fortify it. A storm that destroys a weak tree deepens the roots of a strong one. The difference lies in the mindset with which the storm is faced. If you have decided that every obstacle is a gift, no matter how it arrives, then you have already robbed failure of its sting. You have already turned pain into strategy. This is why those who possess an unbreakable mindset appear almost invincible to others. Their secret is not that they avoid defeat, but that defeat is never the final word. For them, It is only a chapter. They rewrite the ending until it aligns with their vision. And the more life attempts to discourage them, the more ingenious their strategies become. They turn setbacks into stepping stones and resistance into refinement. So, if you want to remain untouchable, make this rule your foundation: never waste a setback. Do not complain about it. Do not curse it. Study it, learn from it, and use it to outwit the very forces that sought to stop you. When you adopt this discipline, you transform not only your capacity to succeed but also your relationship with failure itself. It no longer haunts you, it serves you. Remember this truth as you move forward. Life will not spare you from hardship, but it will always reward those who can turn hardship into wisdom. The untouchable are not those who never fall, but those who rise from each fall with sharper vision, stronger will, and a strategy refined by fire. Every setback is an invitation. The question is, will you decline it, or will you accept it and step closer to greatness? Because the moment you embrace your defeats as allies, you stop being breakable. You stop being at the mercy of circumstances. You become, in the truest sense of the word, untouchable. The ego is a curious thing. It is both the spark that can drive a man toward greatness and the chain that can bind him to mediocrity. Left unchecked, it demands validation, applause, and dominance. It thrives on being seen and heard, on proving itself superior to others. But here lies the paradox: the more the ego speaks, the weaker the man becomes. The more it seeks to be recognized, the more it exposes his neediness and fragility. True strength, the kind that endures storms and commands respect without a single word, comes not from inflating the ego but from mastering it. Mastery of ego is not suppression, it is control. It is knowing when to speak and when silence itself is the loudest authority in the room. Consider for a moment the great leaders and thinkers of history. The most influential among them were not those who rushed to answer every criticism or prove themselves in every debate. They were the ones who could endure misunderstanding, who could withhold their words until the right moment, who could allow others to underestimate them without flinching. Their silence was not weakness, it was strategy. Their restraint was not passivity, it was power refined. A man who has mastered his ego has no need to be constantly seen, because he understands that influence is not always about presence but about precision. Ego, when ungoverned, turns every slight into a wound and every challenge into a personal attack. It causes a man to fight battles that do not matter, wasting energy on proving what does not need to be proven. But mastery of ego redirects that energy toward what does matter: the long-term vision, the greater mission, the higher purpose. Instead of being distracted by petty conflicts or offended by criticism, the individual remains anchored in restraint. Restraint is not inaction. It is the discipline of choosing your actions with wisdom rather than impulse. Think of the martial artist who does not unleash his full force at every strike, but instead waits patiently for the right opening. Or the master chess player who does not move every piece frantically, but instead conserves, calculates, and plays the long game. Silence in such hands is not emptiness, it is anticipation. Control in such hands is not weakness, it is mastery. The same principle applies to the mind. When your ego no longer dictates your reactions, you rise above manipulation, above distraction, and above the need to constantly prove yourself. You become untouchable, because no insult, no rejection, no act of neglect can truly disturb you. There is a profound dignity in the man who does not need to announce his victories or broadcast his achievements. His presence speaks louder than his proclamations. His composure under provocation is itself a demonstration of strength. When you master the ego, you are no longer competing in the noisy arena of validation. You rise above it, operating from a place of self-assurance so deep that others can sense it without a word. Silence becomes a shield, restraint becomes a sword. But understand this: mastering the ego does not mean erasing ambition, confidence, or drive. On the contrary, it sharpens them. Confidence without ego becomes unshakable, because it is not dependent on external praise. Ambition without ego becomes focused, because it is not diluted by petty rivalry. Drive without ego becomes disciplined, because it does not chase fleeting applause but lasting impact. The ego, when mastered, becomes a servant of purpose rather than its tyrant. In life, you will encounter situations designed to provoke your ego. Someone will try to insult you, to undermine you, to test whether you can be rattled. If you fall into the trap, if you react impulsively, you prove their power over you. But if you remain calm, if you respond only when necessary and only with precision, you demonstrate true mastery. This is why silence often defeats noise, why restraint often outmaneuvers aggression. For the man who controls his ego is not bound by the games of others. He is playing his own higher game. The real test of mastery is not how loudly you can roar, but how calmly you can stand when the world expects you to break. The ego screams for recognition, but the mastered mind knows recognition is unnecessary when results speak for themselves. This is the paradox of greatness. The quieter the man becomes, the more his influence grows. His silence carries more weight than the speeches of the loudest voices. His restraint commands more respect than the reckless displays of those enslaved by ego. And so I tell you this: if you wish to walk untouchable, if you wish to stand in a power that cannot be bought, broken, or manipulated, then learn the discipline of silence, and learn the strength of restraint. Govern your ego as you would a wild horse, not by killing its spirit, but by harnessing its energy. Direct it, discipline it, and make it serve your highest aims. In doing so, you rise above the petty battles that consume lesser men and stand firmly in the realm of true power. The man who masters his ego does not need the world to bow before him, because he has already conquered the most dangerous enemy within. And that, my friends, is the power that makes you untouchable.